Karsten's back creaked almost as much as the old wooden cart he pulled through the dirt, his aging bones protesting against the physical task. A lesser man might have groaned or complained at the dull pain in his joints, but he did not. Karsten took pride in his own strength and fortitude. He suspected it was part of what made him perfect for the job. He wouldn't be tempted. He had known a young man many years ago who had not been able to resist the temptation of trying a spell seed just once. The incident had cost another orchardist his arm and had damn well near set the orchard itself ablaze. Even then, decades ago, Karsten had never really entertained the idea of trying some ill-advised spell-slinging of his own. The incident had simply solidified his disinterest in toying with the arcane. As he walked down the row of trees, each plant glittering with the small, faintly glowing spell seeds as though the stars had descended to visit, he once again found himself wondering why the young fool had chosen to conduct his experiment not only with a blaze seed, but a Genesis blaze seed. Toying with forces of heat and flame without training was bad enough, but choosing to do so with the kind of seed that created those things? Karsten couldn't help but chuckle darkly under his breath at the follies of the young. He was alive and largely unmaimed. He was in damn good shape for a man who was approaching his 70s. He'd been called a stick in the mud, unadventurous, but he took pride in that too. He had already outlived most of the naive young men and women who went to war with a bag of spell seeds at their sides. He would outlive many more. He was okay with being boring and unambitious. That was why he got the privilege of living long enough to have an aching back and reminisce about the mistakes of younger men. He came to a halt before a bushy astra tree. Hanging from its branches were a scattering of tide spell seeds, each producing a dull blue glow. Unlike the spherical spell seed the young orchardist of Karsten's memories had made the mistake of toying with, these were cuboid in shape. Alice's seeds, not Genesis. These wouldn't create anything, only manipulate what was already there. What they did was of little consequence to Karsten. His job was to grow and harvest. It was up to others to put the fruits of his labor to use. Karsten began carefully picking the tide seeds, sometimes imagining he could feel the dull thrum of the magic within the vessel, even though he knew the leather of his gloves prevented such a thing. It was starting to get late as Karsten finished harvesting the last of the spell seeds from the Astra, depositing them among a multitude of others in the rickety cart, each bag's contents emitting a different colored glow. Dark as it was, he could scarcely see. Most nights that wouldn't matter too much. Karsten had worked in that orchard for so long that he could navigate it near perfectly by memory alone. But that night was not most nights, because he was not alone in his journey between the Astras. Barely loud enough to be heard over the creaking of the wagon or his own footsteps over the earth, Karsten heard the snapping of a branch under a boot. As far as he knew, Karsten should have been the only orchardist around. He was always the first to arrive and the last to leave. Just another small thing to take pride in. Thus, the situation did beg the question, who was creeping around in the dark? "Who's that?" he barked out, trying to peer through the gloom, using the light of his cargo as a poor substitute for torchlight. No reply. Karsten sighed. He was positive he'd heard the sound. "I'm not one for playing games. Who's there?" Again, there was no response. Grunting, Karsten pulled on the cart and set back to making his way through the orchard. Perhaps he had been simply imagining things after all, lost in his own thoughts as he had been. Still, he could not help the feeling that he hadn't been alone, which was why, paradoxically, when he rounded a copse to find himself facing down a group of people in dark leathers in the glow of an oil lamp, it was relief that he felt first. Although, when he registered the muskets carried by those assembled, the more logical sense of alarm was quick to take over. Evening. Karsten kept his breath measured. Best not to alarm them. Besides, he'd be damned if they'd get to see him squirm. "We'll make this quick and easy for you," the apparent leader of the group said. Her voice was low and raspy, but definitely that of a woman. "Just back away from the cart. We'll fill up our bags and be on our way. This doesn't need to be messy." Were these thieves from his own town or otherwise nearby who had simply stumbled upon the location of the orchard and sought to get powerful or wealthy quickly? Or was this an even worse situation? Had the enemy located the orchard with the intent of taking the spell seeds and turning them back on their growers? Not sure what you'd even need these for, if I'm honest, Karsten said. You've got your weapons. Why bother with spell seeds? A lump of lead can kill a man just as easily. But not as efficiently. We're not interested in killing one man. But we're not interested in killing you specifically either. So just back away. The hooded woman illustrated her point with a gesture of her weapon. In the dark, Karsten was slipping off one of his gloves before he had even realized he was doing it. You know, I've never been one to try my luck with the seeds. I just do my job, grow them and pick them. And you will get to keep doing so, the leader of the thieves said, her dwindling patience evident in her tone. Karsten wasn't so sure. Would anyone ever really trust him in such an important position again if he let these people take the seeds now? It didn't matter if they were a local problem or a unit from across the border. They weren't people who should be allowed to access magic. No. Much as Karsten's pride had always kept him from experimenting with the spell seeds, now it demanded something different. He plunged his bare hand into one of the bags on his cart and felt a violent surge of energy run up his arm.
Hello and welcome back to Stories Across Borders. Here we discuss stories told across a wide array of different mediums. Our one rule is that we can only discuss things in terms of the narrative, anything like art, mechanics, or whatever. That is off limits unless it directly impacts the way the story is told. My name is Daniel Radford, author, terrible gardener, and also your host, and I am once more joined by John Kernan, the voice behind the reading you just heard.
I'm a great gardener. I've only lost 3 of my orchard workers.
Not a bad record.
Yeah, I mean, it's partially because after the third one, nobody else tried again, but I mean, hey, 3 is 3.
Yeah, the numbers don't lie. Speaking of not lying, tonight we are wrapping up our theme of magic with a discussion of my short story, The Orchard, better title pending, and whatever strange tangents we find ourselves on from there. The Orchard, of course, being the aforementioned story reading.
I like trees.
Who
What?
doesn't? I don't know. I did not see that coming from just something about the earnest. I like trees.
I do. I like trees, and orchards are filled with trees, so orchards are nice. Even when they're not magic. But let's be real. Nature is always magic.
Uh, sure.
Magic is just the parts of nature we don't fully understand yet, like gravity or where toe jam comes from.
I think I think we have answers to both of those things.
You would think there's always greater mysteries to be discovered.
We're starting this one strong. Um, never exactly sure where to start these ones. I say, despite it being only the second. So I suppose I'll just go a little into the backstory for the Orchard and why that particular short story became a thing. Uh, Simply put, honestly, it was inspired by a magic system I've had in my head for ages without any real thing to attach it to. So this episode just gave me an excuse to do something with that particular idea.
Heck yeah.
I it honestly the idea of magic growing on trees I'm pretty sure has been around in my head for literal years at this point. The spell seeds concept in particular even has been around for a while. It's just more recently with having to do this episode in mind that I developed it out a little bit more to have more of an idea of what it would actually look like and be.
Right.
Because I didn't want to just do 'Cause, I mean, obviously it's another elemental system, but I didn't want it to just be your standard elemental magic shit.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, that's always one of the great questions of setting up any kind of magic system is like, okay, how do I avoid making it haha to the black mage, white mage? Look at the fireballs.
yeah. Exactly, and I think fantasy as well is a very oversaturated genre, so there is more and more of an onus on how you can make your magic system unique and interesting. The way I chose to go about that was to take your basic sort of elemental system, but tweak it just a little bit. So instead of your traditional either four elemental fire, water, wind, earth, or sometimes there's an extra fifth one in there. I broke it down
Yeah, like
into
metal. Thanks, Top.
or whatever the thing your particular world adds in. Yeah, for me, what I did was something very similar, but I took sort of typical natural things. That was a terrible way of explaining natural environmental forces.
What are you talking about? Magic is always some sort of other natural things. You're off to a great start.
Words is my job. Words are my job. Oh, Jesus Christ.
No, I mean, I think it works either way because, like, you
uh,
know, words as a concept is your job. So, like, don't worry, your English is fine.
I would really hope so.
If you ever doubt your English, just remind everybody that you're Australian and then nobody's allowed to complain.
Is that how that works? Can I apply that to other things?
That depends on how weird the Australian version of those things is. So, with most stuff about nature, yes.
Excellent. I shall
You
keep
could
that
be
in
like, guys,
mind.
it's not my fault nature is stupid. I live in Australia. Like,
This
just
shit just
remind people
really grows on trees here. Is it not like that
I have
everywhere else?
I have woken up with huntsman spiders on my face. You people don't understand.
This is
That's all you gotta say.
that is a fact. That has happened to me. Happened to me whilst I was a child in a loft bed and I sat up and smacked my head on the roof.
I luckily I never had to worry too much about waking up with real spiders on my head, but weirdly enough, there was a period of time where I, despite not really being afraid of spiders, was having these little pseudo nightmares like almost every well, not almost every night, but at least like 2 or 3 times a week where I would wake up really early in the morning while my room was still dark, and for the first second I opened my eyes, I would see a really big, really scary looking spider dangling right above my face, just long enough to shoot upright in bed and look around and not be able to find anything.
Well, okay. Today we learned that your sleep paralysis demon takes the form of a large spider.
Yeah. I don't know why he would do that. Like I said, I'm not even scared of spiders. I mean,
Blessedly me
I'm
either.
scared of him, but he's scary.
But yes, we have already successfully tangented on something completely unrelated. If we
Dreams are magic,
yeah, as we do.
and they grow on trees.
But yeah, so I took heat, flame, and all that for the blaze seeds because bushfires or solar energy, all that kind of stuff. Fire and heat are a pretty common natural thing, a force of nature, if you will. Uh,
You know what,
that's the phrase that I've been struggling to get out this entire time. Uh,
I uh I gotta say, I haven't thought of any clever ones for the other kinds of seeds yet, but you know what I think would actually be also potentially a good name for the fire genesis seed? If you wanted to just give it one name instead of a twist on the regular one, you could call it a Prometheus seed,
oh, that is really good.
because it brings humanity fire.
That is really good. There is a reason why it was a fire genesis seed. Specifically, is that there is a secondary classification in the system. That's one of the things I did to differentiate it out. Is that in addition to there being the sort of elements quotation marks of Blaze, Tide, Stormquake, and Bio. That's all of them, although I think only two get mentioned in the story. Uh, can you tell that I've had plans to maybe do something bigger with this? uh, there was also
Like what?
the Grand.
Magical redwood trees?
Sorry?
Bigger like what? Magical redwood trees?
I never really did specify how big the Astras were now that you mention it. Um,
That would probably be really hard to harvest. I bet half of the orchard workers who would die wouldn't even be from spell mishaps. It would just be from a seed landing on their head after it fell from too high up.
just coconut style.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Oh, Jerry, wrong place, wrong time, sorry.
no, it's fine. Um, but no, the reason it was specifically was a Genesis seed is because there's a secondary classification system where Genesis seeds specifically create something relating to the element in question. Then there's Terminus seeds which specifically destroy something in relation to that element, and Elastus
Ah,
seeds which manipulate it if it already exists or convert its form.
dang. Well, that's how you know it's really magic. It's breaking the laws, not just of physics, but of conservation of matter.
I think I may have said this in the very first episode of the cycle, even, but like one of the ways I'd define magic or a magic system is just the ability to violate the rules of the universe as we understand them.
Yep. That's part of the fun of the balance, right? Is like you need to give your own magic its own rules. And if you want extra wrinkles and fun, you want to try to have a certain amount of interplay between magic and the actual laws of physics instead of it just completely ignoring them. But it wouldn't be magic if it just had to follow the laws of physics. Then it would just be not even quite science. It would just be a cheat button.
Yeah, I mean, I
Do
think
science without the science.
I I've said before, like there is some good to soft magic systems. I don't think they are universally bad or anything like that. We had very long discussions about when they work and when they don't over the last few episodes. But I do think, as a general rule, magic systems function better when there is clear rules to how they work,
Oh yeah.
because then it sets guidelines for you as the writer.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, no, it's like even all the good soft magic systems still have a pretty well-defined rule set themselves too, right? They're just more vague about it. And some soft magic systems are almost like a slightly weird way to put it, but like some soft magic systems are almost kind of lies in that there's actually plenty of rules, but what helps make it soft is the audience is only ever shown or told so many rules and not quite everything is explained.
you see, I think that's where we come into the an interesting gray area, because I wouldn't necessarily say that that's a lie. I think that is still a soft magic system, but under the proviso that it's a soft magic system because chances are the author doesn't know the rules either. I feel like those are soft magic systems that are masquerading as hard magic systems, which is clever, and I approve, but you can find yourself written into corners there as well, where you're trying to imply rules that don't actually exist.
True, but part of the ones I was getting at is that I also think sometimes they just some authors genuinely do have a stronger idea of what it's supposed to be underneath, and they just keep a lot of it close to the chest.
I mean, I'd believe it. I mean, like I said, even for that short story, I touched on, I think, one of the like creation, destruction, manipulation type things, and I touched on, I think, two elements out of five, and of those, very narrow ideas of what they encompass. Because it's like our friend Carsten talks about, I believe he talks about tide as, it would have been so bad if he got the water one, but tide
Yeah.
is also gravity.
Whoa, water and gravity? That's like the moon.
Exactly. Uh,
I like the moon.
I'm noticing you like a lot of sort of ever present picturesque images.
Well, that's part of it, but I also just I like the links of things. I think of tides, I think of the moon.
Yeah, that is specifically what led me to making part of the sort of water element gravity is the whole moon pulling on the ocean, creating tides thing. Because again,
See,
I wanted to do something that was familiar,
like,
but not the, exact standard 4 or 5 element system that we're familiar with. It had to be a little different. I think, I mean, I don't want to toot my own horn too much or anything like that, but I think that that's just a genuinely or general, I suppose both fit here, a good way of going about doing something that is as kind of overdone really as an elemental magic system is you just take it and shift things around just a little bit to make it functional without doing something completely wacky, because you don't want to end up with an elemental system where your elements don't make sense.
true.
So you kind of, when you do that kind of a system, is you're walking a fine line between recognizability and originality.
I want to see the bio seeds. I bet they either cast poison or create BOWs. Give me my Resident Evil seeds.
I don't know what a BOW is.
Bioorganic weapon.
Yeah, I can
It,
confirm for you they absolutely could do that.
yeah.
Because I wanted a fifth element. I didn't want to have the standard 4. And normally, if I was going to write an elemental system and I needed a fifth element, I would put electricity in there. But that's a part of storm, which is wind and electricity and vacuums and all that stuff. I was like, wow, I need like a natural force. Hmm, there's got to be another one, right? And it took me entirely too long to. Oh yeah, life. The bio seeds basically have anything to do with plant and animal matter, toxins, healing, that sort of thing. Literally the manipulation of biology. Which, I mean, honestly, now that I didn't really think that hard about it at first, and now that I'm thinking about it now, there's some really disturbing implications about what you could do with those.
True.
I think my sort of darker story inclinations maybe showed through there subconsciously.
Subconsciously, he says.
Well, I mean, it wasn't the intent to just go to be like, yes, we have the fires and we have the water and we have some like storm stuff, some tectonics. Oh, and body horror. This one's body horror.
Sometimes bodies are horrible. Sometimes you think you're trying to be Professor X, and instead you end up being Professor Triple Extra Large.
I worry about you sometimes.
What? He's a fun guy, which would be a much more fitting thing to say if his mutation was a mushroom, but it's a lobster arm.
Of course it is. It took me a while to try and discern if you were talking about an actual character that exists or if you were pulling something out of your ass, because I would not know.
Yeah, he's from back in the days of like Kids Next Door and that stuff around Cartoon Network.
Okay, that makes sense.
He's originally in his own little like spin-off side thing, but then he showed up in Kids Next Door because he's just too good to leave on the table.
I don't remember that.
He only shows up in like a little in like an episode or two. He's not an important character in the plot, but he shows up to fight them because he is a bad adult with weird power stuff going on.
I think we have inadvertently touched on something that is actually kind of interesting about the notion of magic systems and worlds with that kind of functionality in them in general, is that we tend to think of fantasy and magic stuff as being very whimsical, although I suppose in more recent years, thanks largely to A Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones and all that, the darker fantasy stories have become a bit more prevalent. But there is a lot of potential for horror and just really messed up shit in a world where magic exists. Um,
Very
I
true.
don't quote me on this. I think it was Stephen King who said it. Was essentially that most horror stories are in essence just fantasy stories because any supernatural horror story effectively relies on some form of magic.
True.
And I think that's actually an excellent environment for soft magic systems to thrive in. Because the fact that it is otherworldly and unknowable plays into the story instead of against it.
Stuff's always fun.
Yeah, I mean, I believe, was it, oh God, you can see, the audience is about to discover that the gap in recording these last few episodes. Because I think it was the last episode where we discussed the idea that hard magic systems and soft magic were good at different things, where soft is particularly good at causing problems, whilst hard is particularly good at solving problems in a narrative sense. I think that was it was either the last one or the first one of the cycle, and I honestly couldn't tell you which. I do think though that those rules, like, I don't think those are necessarily exclusive, because a little less so with soft. I don't think I think it really is a lot harder to solve problems with soft magic systems in a narratively satisfying way, but I don't think that hard magic systems can't cause problems. It's just that the same system can also be used to then solve those same problems because they exist in a system with rules.
True. Rules are important,
Um,
especially to magic.
yeah. Uh, in the system I use for the orchard, obviously the chief problem in that little story is created by the existence of the seeds. Whoever these people with muskets are, they want them.
And they're
Because,
probably not good people if they're gonna steal something like that at gunpoint.
yeah, it doesn't necessarily imply good things about them. I have some ideas of who they are, and what they might be up to and some stuff like that, and some notions of a larger world beyond that one orchard in my head. I would like to eventually maybe do a longer work using this system in that world. So, you may see more of them at some point. um, but I think that that's something that is important to consider when you are introducing a magic system to a world, is how that affects that world.
Say so.
Because, yeah, it's not gonna look like just our regular world, but also people are casting spells. It's going to change how infrastructure is, it's going to change resources, it's going to change transport, potentially, depending on how the magic of that world functions. In the case of the orchard, spell magic through spell seeds is a natural resource that is simultaneously so many different things that we prize in our society, just as people. I nearly said it. I'm not going to say it. Um,
Yeah.
uh,
I mean, we do live in a society.
damn it. Uh,
You're speaking truth to power, my man.
wiser words have never been spoken. Yeah, like when you look at how humanity in reality reacts to uh, any kind of rare and valuable and useful resource in the world, be it a source of energy or a weapon or whatever. And I looked at that and I considered that magic, at least in this sense, in this world, is effectively all of those things at once. So it's probably something pretty contentious that different nations or organizations or whatever are going to want to have a grasp on.
True. Humanity's really good at wanting things.
That's why the orchards probably are all quite out of the way, not easy to find.
Yeah,
And
there's
why people still find them, because if you want
people
something
want.
bad enough, you will find a way to get it.
True. For better or for worse.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it and still do see it time and time again. And I think that's also something to consider when you're writing a story of a more fantastical nature, is that humans still have to be human. Well, I mean, within reason. Like, maybe a better way to say that would be people should still feel like people. even in a world that is fantastical, if you want to have those characters feel believable, even to the context of the world they're in. So, if you are in a world where like magic and spellcraft is widespread or common or grows on trees or whatever, people,
Just for an example.
yeah, just for example, just as a thing I've pulled out of nowhere, people are probably going to gravitate towards it as a source of intrigue or as something alluring because of the power of it. But they're not going to have their minds blown by its existence and the general idea of what it's capable of. And that's how you get people like Carsten who are like, yeah, what about it? Where's the pride in, playing with weird things on trees when you can do things with your own hands?
I'm just over here doing my job. I gotta make a living. Somebody's gotta do it. Everyone else who's done it screwed it up.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think because I wrote this after we discussed the inheritance cycle, I think that discussion actually almost certainly had an impact on Carsten coming into being, because I think we went
Oh
on a
yeah.
fairly long spiel about how cool Roran is just because he's a normal dude in a magic world.
I
And
think
he
the
still
way we
gets
have
shit done.
I think we have the way we have the podcast set up is honestly really good for what you call it. Not writing practice, but well, I guess fuel would be part of it.
I mean, practice is a part of it, because here's peel back the curtain for the audience. For the second time we've done one of these story episodes, I whilst I do have a backlog of ideas and stories and things like that, most of them aren't really written down in a form that is fit for consumption. So I'm effectively writing these stories as I need them, which does make for a good practice, and it's interesting because it does put me in the mindset of all the things we've talked about leading up to it. It helps me clarify in my head, I suppose, what I like or dislike about certain things. And maybe it's interesting for the audience. I don't really know. I suppose we'll find out. To see how those opinions then sort of crystallize and take form.
Anybody not interested in this shit is a hack. That's right, I said it.
It was just a really interesting choice of word to go to. I suppose it goes to say that a decent amount of our audience are probably interested in writing, so fair enough. For what it's worth, I don't think any of them are hacks, because I would like them to keep listening.
Don't simp for your audience, make your audience simp for you.
That needs to be on a shirt.
You
We
gotta
don't
simp,
have
you
merch,
gotta
but if
take a
we
little
did,
bit of
that would be on it.
someday. Sometimes you just gotta have a little bit of that VTuber mentality, Garner the simp power.
Why didn't I start there instead of technical discussions of literature?
Not everybody can be a master of acute business acumen.
Hear me out. We scrap this. We do VTubing instead, except both of our avatars are just Carsten.
I like Karsten. I'll be a grumpy old man. I would love to make the first VTuber avatar that's a grumpy old man.
It has to, but it's the internet. It's been done before. There's no way it hasn't.
I mean, my instincts always say that everything must have been done at some point, but I haven't seen it.
If you haven't seen it, it's not real.
I mean, I don't know anybody who does a better job keeping track of that stuff than our dear Ms. Burb, and she hasn't said to me anything about it. I feel like she would have brought it up because it would be hilarious. So it
No,
doesn't
no,
mean it
you're
doesn't
right.
exist, but if it does exist, it's probably not popular or known yet, so it's free realism.
Something else to lend your vocal talents to.
I can't wait. I'll have to work on my old man voice and get just a little bit of anime in there.
Just a little. Just a sprinkling of that delicious weeb seasoning.
a smidgen, some might say.
Uh, yeah, some might.
A
Um,
smacker even.
so,
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I've largely been just leading this conversation along.
It is in fact your story. That's
It
true.
is, it is in fact my story, but I feel like I would be remiss to sort of not give you a chance to ask any questions or whatever you had.
Well, a lot of the questions that pop into my mind are more like wait and see type things where I'm like, I'd love to see where this goes, or a greater and wider instance of this world with a little more heft to it. Um, Story's nice and straightforward. Actually, honestly, one of my favorite ways. It's one of my favorite what do you call it, ratios of doing a short story. I think you did a good level of show don't tell. You did tell some things, but it's mostly just an old man going for a walk, thinking to himself, and then, oh look, plot, terrorism.
Didn't see that coming. um, that's fair. I mean, I suppose part of the reason there is this like implicit larger world beyond is because there is one. It's very poorly formed at this point, beyond the vague notions of what's happening in it and the magic system itself. And it's probably going to be a while before I get to actually doing anything larger scale with it because I'm currently writing the sequel to Dominoes, so uh
True.
well, it's not really a sequel, it's a spin-off, but we'll get to that another day. Um but I do sort of like the idea of a lot of these story reading episodes, being little snippets into things that I may do in the future or that I would like to explore more in the future. And it's also a good indicator for me as an author putting stuff out there that I can see which ones of these are more popular and people enjoy more and have more to say about, and then I can use that to inform what I do next.
Yeah, that's part of what I was getting at with it offering more for the writing than just practice, is like this kind of stuff gets the juices pumping, because at the end of the day, in the same way that we are in a lot of ways just a combination of all of our different experiences piling on top of a base of who we were to begin with, like anything we create for ourselves is always at least partially a summation of all the things other people have created that inspired us.
Yeah, I mean,
Talking about this stuff is good for the brain muscles.
I think that's
Gray
definitely
juices.
very true. We we as like creators, we like to think of ourselves in terms of being original and unique. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think we should definitely strive for originality. Uh, but there is definitely a degree of self-delusion in that if you refuse to acknowledge that you have some, even if it's not like intentionally replicating things that others have done or their styles or whatever, that their styles have rubbed off on you.
Yeah,
Uh,
like you can't just avoid that stuff. It's gonna hit you.
you can't. I mean, you are. It's like you said. You are the culmination of your experiences, and that includes the assorted media and mediums you have consumed. And
So
for me, that's probably why there is a lot of flavors of good old Roran in Karsten because I have through growing up and all the way through from being a preteen to being an adult, I've read those books a million times. It's and it becomes it's less about being completely original and the little sparkles of or sprinklings of totally different or a new take on thing that make work feel organically new. Yeah, let this be a lesson to fellow writers out there. It's okay for you to be inspired by somebody.
Yeah, I mean, Karsten is practically just Roran if he never got married.
He's just old, right?
It's just a version of Roran that never got married, but still ended up having to deal with a bunch of magic bullshit he didn't ask for.
I mean, we had this. We said this before we started recording, where it's like, we have all known this guy.
Without exception,
Yeah,
everybody.
without exception, everyone has met an old dude who is really set in his way, doesn't understand the appeal of all this newfangled shit, and he just wants to keep doing what he's doing, working his ass off until he dies.
You know,
That's Karsten. That's your example of uh real, genuine humanity still finding its way into fantasy stories.
yeah, it's a vibe.
It's it's something. I I'm not sure what it was that made me want to go with that guy specifically. I mean, obviously I was pulled into the sort of quotation marks non-magical. Not that anyone's really non-magical in that world, but because it's not an innate thing. But I was definitely pulled into the non-magical person experiencing the fantastical world. I don't know what made me want to make him old though, but at the same time, I'm glad I did because it let me look at that world through the lens of someone who has seen all this shit before.
Way to go.
Yeah, there was something really fun about riding a guy who has, you know, gotten to a pretty good age, all things considered, without any major mishaps, but he's been around long enough to have seen all this magical crap before to the point where it's just mundane to him and just he just doesn't see the appeal.
Yeah, I've seen your fancy magic. I wasn't impressed. But but magic can do all these crazy things. Yeah? It still needs me to plant the seeds and cultivate the trees, don't it?
Yeah, I mean that is an interesting question that I guess I'll have to solve when I well, I don't want to say when, I don't want to give anyone false impressions. If I do something bigger with this particular story and world, is that bioseeds exist. Can they influence astro trees? And I'm leaning towards no, but I'm gonna have to think of a reason why.
Yeah. I would definitely lean towards no personally on that one too, if only because like if bio seeds could affect trees, the trees probably would have already gone out of control and like
Yeah,
had their own little apocalypse of the world by now.
probably, yeah. I mean,
It would only take one or two instances of that happening for shit to get real weird.
yeah, the way the astro trees work basically is that uh they absorb like the latent magical energy that's just in the atmosphere of the world as nutrients, and then the excess gets filtered into the seeds. So there's probably something I can do in there with that functionality to explain why the bioseeds can't then also influence the astro trees. Uh, because well, I suppose the answer actually is right there. It's that magic isn't biological. It's something extra that's being absorbed by the trees. So even if you made the trees grow, you wouldn't get any extra magic out of it. That right there is a window into the thought process of an author who has discovered a problem. All right. Um, little bit of a slightly shorter episode today, but I honestly think we may as well leave that one there. It's not a super long story to discuss, and we've gotten into most of the ins and outs of it, and also my thoughts on the things that apply to it across this episode and the ones that came before it anyway.
Yeah, I had
So,
fun.
yeah, I think we will end that one there. So, yeah, once again, follow my stuff. I follow John's stuff when there is more stuff. Usually, at the moment, lots of his stuff is attached to mine, and
Yeah.
I will be back for my next cycle of episodes on horror with a different guest, but John will be back in the future.
Shame.
Well, no, we like you here.
No, I just mean because I like horror.
We'll probably get a redux. There's a lot to say on the subject. Anyway, before we get down another tangent, we'll see you guys next time.